Good Saturday morning to everybody, and welcome to Legal Notes with Mary Ann Charron and Ned Barron. I'm Gary Byron. Good morning, gang. How are you this morning?
Good morning. We're good.
Fantastic.
We've, was it last week or the week before? I think it was last week. We talked a lot about Medicare.
Yeah, we
that's another one we forgot to mention.
Ah, yes.
Title 19 planning, right?
Yeah, well, it's all part of the same thing.
Planning,
health insurance.
Long-term care issues, elder law issues.
Yes, Ned, yes.
The list is so long.
Oh, my
we
God.
Forgot.
So last week we were trying so hard to have people understand the difference between Medicare and Medicaid.
Okay.
And we talked mostly about Medicare, which is a health insurance. So when you're ready to turn 65, you get a letter from Social Security saying you are now eligible to have Part A health insurance. And if you don't pick it up when you can, you do get penalized. So that's Medicare. Medicare pays for your hospital stay. And then there's Part B, Part C, Part D, which has to do with different types of prescription coverages and things like that. So that's Medicare. All right.
Okay.
You want to take Medicaid?
Sure. Medicaid is a needs-based state and federal program. So it's a federal program that is administered by the state. So the federal government provides the funding, most of the funding, and then the state administers it. So regulations are some regulations are set by the state. There's some that are fixed by the federal government, but each state has a little bit different nuance as to who would qualify and what things such as look-back periods, what value of assets are allowed to be retained by the person or the spouse and all that.
So in Connecticut, that's Department of Social Services, DSS. Mm-hmm. So they administer this lovely program. And people essentially have to be impoverished. Okay, so last week we were talking about, what happens when somebody's hospitalized, right? So you have an older person, they have to go to the hospital, they break their hip, I don't know, they fall, break the hip, whatever. And then they need to go into rehab. Does insurance cover that? Well, so you ask, does Medicare cover that? And I don't know if you remember, but we started talking about that Medicare will only cover it as long as you are improving. So if the hospital or the doctors feel that you are no longer advancing in your PT and OT, then you become what's called custodial care. And Medicare does not continue to cover that hospital stay.
So then who does?
Right. That's when you have to start spending your own money.
Oh, boy.
Right? So you spend it down. You just, and I think we may have ended, if I recall correctly, last week we ended on saying that nursing home care is between $14,000 and $18,000 a month.
I just received a list of charges from a nursing home down in the Danbury area, and what their daily private pay rate is for a semi-private room. So you still have a roommate,
right?
And I calculated it out, and it's $154,000 a year.
Yep.
I mean, you could stay at the Waldorf Astoria for, $150,000 a year and have all your meals taken care of as well. I mean,
but you wouldn't get the skilled nursing.
No, you wouldn't get the skilled. But if you were to itemize it and just break it all down,
I think it was $465 a day.
It's astronomical, and it can take people down. So if you figure that somebody who has,
right.
So if someone who has worked really hard their entire life, and whether they have just a pension or they have some savings, they have managed to pay off the mortgage on their home, right? And you have to come up with $15,000 a month. It's pretty easy to know that after a few months or several months, you're not going to have anything left. But that's the point of what Medicaid is. Medicaid is there when you don't have anything left. And make sure that you have a roof over your head. Make sure that there is someone who's going to watch over you. Make sure that you have food, whether you think it's delicious or not. To make sure you have allegedly nutritious, balanced meals. Those are the type of things that Medicaid is going to cover. So
you can't have a dime in your account.
You can have $1,600.
$1,600.
Actually, you can have less than $1,600.
So $1,599.
Yeah, if you're $1 over, you don't qualify for the state to pay for your coverage, for your care.
And I would imagine you exhaust that, and that's gone, and you could realistically have zero.
That's right. So what happens is, go ahead.
You're not allowed money for your pocket, I take it.
Well, no, actually, no. You are, as a nursing home resident, you are allowed a monthly allowance.
And tell them what it is. Let this audience know exactly how big it is.
It's $60 a month.
$60 a month you get.
That's if you have income. So if you have Social Security or a pension, then you are entitled to that. If you have no income, then you're entitled to $30 a month.
Yeah. So
what are you supposed to do with $30 a month?
You might be able to get a haircut.
Right.
Coffee. Or...
Yeah. I mean, the idea is that you're in a nursing home, that all of your
that
needs
technically
are being
you shouldn't need anything
taken care of, except for
no little
haircuts
Debbie's
and
no Hostess cupcakes.
Oh my goodness.
So it's really, you have to be impoverished. And so the big thing is, what happens between the time you're hospitalized and you now are custodial care and you have this pot of money? And I would have to say that people generally come to us, family members come to us and say, can we start giving money away?
And of course, you have to say no. That's illegal.
Well, actually, it depends.
If you got a lot of money, right? Because I don't know. Do you want to try to explain that 5-year look back?
Sure.
Okay.
So obviously, the state has an interest in people not making themselves destitute, right, to qualify, right, to give away their assets to the point that they only have $1,600. And then they would qualify, right? You would think, because that is the first step. You have to have $1,600 or less in assets in your name.
So some people, hold on, let me just kind of back up a little bit. Some people will say, well, wait a minute. If I can get care for free and give my money away to my family, that's what I want. So there are some people who want to impoverish themselves so that as they can get rid of their money, like to their family members or other people, friends, right? You, anybody, then they qualify for Medicaid. And so the state has caught on to that. The state's like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, of course. That wouldn't take long.
Right. So that was the only.
And people quit claiming properties and giving away jewelry.
Sure.
And yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But so the what Marianne was referring to, which is the look back period,
right? Which
the regulation states that, well, when an application is made to the Department of Social Services for Medicaid, one of the requirements is to provide documentation of financial transactions going back 5 years from the date of application.
Right.
And so what that means is they're going to say, we want bank statements, investment company statements, statements regarding retirement accounts and all that going back those 5 years, because what the state's going to do at Department of Social Services is they're going to go through those statements with a fine-tooth comb, and they're going to be looking for any transfers of those assets to other people to make sure that the person who is trying to qualify for Medicaid did not give away assets to impoverish themselves, right? To not give them to their children, which is a common idea.
The date that you apply for Medicaid, you have to submit with your application the past 5 years worth of your finances. Okay? And they look through that with a fine-tooth comb, and they're going to say, who got this $5,000? What happened? I see there was a transfer that came into you for $50,000. Where did it go? I saw a transfer that went out for $50,000. Where did it go? What happened to the CD? I see on the bank statement that you had 2 CDs that matured. On the next bank statement, the CD's missing. What happened to it? Right? So these are the type of things. So you have to provide an explanation. Well, I gave it to my daughter because she was helping to take care of me. Oh, really? Your daughter was helping to take care of you? Can you prove that your daughter was taking care of you? I mean, so they have all sorts of...
But they go back 5 years.
5 years.
So if you got to plan ahead.
Great.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So Ned was just saying the annualized cost is 150, what'd you say, 154?
Yep.
154. So let's pretend it's 150 so that we can do easy on-air math. Okay. So if it's $150,000 a year that you have to come up with times 5 years, if my math is correct, that's $750,000. So if we have a client who has assets in excess of $750,000, then I suppose we could say, all right, then if you have $1 million, let's pretend that they have $1 million. They come to me or they come to Ned with $1 million, and we say, you have to set aside to privately pay 5 years worth of care. That's $750,000. That leaves $250,000 that you could potentially give away if you so chose. Because then we got 5 years worth of care. We apply private paid care. Mm-hmm. We apply 5 years in 1 day, right? Mm-hmm. And then that $250,000 worth of transfers is not going to be, you won't be penalized as a result of that. But you need to have $750,000
to get you to the 5 years where you're now it's now taken care of for you after that.
So that's
it sounds like a game that's being played.
Part of it's a game. Part of it, you say, okay, well, how do we best use our tax dollars? We do want to take care of people who are impoverished. We do want to take care of the neediest of the needy. And so we have a really good policy, a reason to do something that is really good and kind and, what we think is our responsibility to, let's say, our older generation, right? But on the other hand, there's always abuses. And so hence we have this gamesmanship. Then we have all these rules and exceptions to rules and things like that.
Yeah, and it's not dissimilar from, our tax codes, right? Like everyone, you hire an accountant to help you minimize your income taxes, right? It's the same thing with hiring an attorney to help you minimize the amount of money that you're going to have to pay out of pocket to pay for your long-term care, because otherwise the state is going to be able to step in. So if you utilize the present laws to be able to legally shelter assets from those long-term care costs, then you can do that. You just have to, in this case, you have to make those plans 5 years before you're going to have to actually, or more than 5 years before you're going to have to need to apply.
And sometimes that's hard because if somebody, for example, has a car accident or a seizure or some sort of, I'll say life-altering kind of event that then requires skilled nursing care, you don't have the ability to plan 5 years ahead. If you have a family member who has, let's say, early onset dementia, then you could say, okay, wait a minute, we know where this is going, right? We don't know, dad doesn't need skilled care right now, but it's going to happen at some point in time. It's easier to do a 5-year plan when you have someone with dementia than somebody who's had, I don't know, like a seizure or brain aneurysm, something that is like,
traumatic brain injury or something.
Oh, like shoot.
Right. Unless there's a lot of money. In the example you gave, if there was $1 million, you could still do that planning, even with those catastrophic events.
So, I just want our audience to understand about Title 19 and to understand how important it is to do planning if it's at all possible. One of the things, Ned, if you don't mind, let's talk about the difference between somebody who is single. So let's say you're by yourself, a spouse has already died, and then married. And then we can kind of talk about the community spouse.
Sure. But
you want to talk about what the financial requirements are? So if you're single and you end up needing a nursing home.
Well, I thought we already went over that that you are required to private pay until your assets have been spent down to $1,600.
But that means so that means you have to sell your house. That means that you have to take everything out of your 401k if you have one.
Right. If you have a vehicle needs to be sold, and then the proceeds so all of your assets need to be sold or liquidated in order to be able to fund your private pay.
And that's if you're single.
So if you're married, your spouse can keep your house, though, right?
Yes, that's really important to know. So if you're married, so that's why I wanted to kind of compare it just so people understand. If you are married, then the spouse does get the house. The spouse gets one car, right? Because that's the only person who needs to drive. You only need one car. And you get, right now in 2021, you get 1/2 of the assets capped at $130,000. Okay, I think the number is 133.80. I think is the actual number, but let's just say it's 130,000.
So give us an example of what happens if a husband needs skilled care then.
All right, you want to take that?
Sure. Well,
because it is usually the men.
Yeah, first I want to...
Because historically they're older than right? I knew where you were going with this.
Okay, go ahead.
Crazy.
Yeah, I'm a little speechless because
me too. Actually,
because what I want to say I can't say right now. But,
women take better care of themselves.
Oh, is that what it is? Oh,
all right, go ahead,
folks. You're listening to Legal Notes. I'm going to let them gather their thoughts together. Legal Notes with Mary Ann Charron and Ned Barron from Charter Oak Law Group. I'm Gary Byron. You can also check them out at charteroaklaw.com. All right, so let's say a husband has a 401k. It's worth $500,000.
Yep.
Well, when we have a married couple and one of the spouses needs long-term care and is contemplating applying for Medicaid to help pay for that the state looks at all of the assets that are owned by both spouses. So these are
no matter how they're titled.
Right. So these are considered the marital assets. So you can have a husband with a 401k worth $500,000. That's in his name alone. The wife could have a 401k worth $500,000. That's in her name alone. However, the state looks at it as this is a couple. These are marital assets, and these marital assets are required to be used to help pay for the care of the spouse that needs to be in a nursing home. So that's the first thing. Now it's already been mentioned that a spouse who is now residing in a nursing home is called the institutionalized spouse. This is per our regulations, and the spouse that is who is not is called the community spouse. So when we look at that the community spouse is allowed to keep certain assets, what's already been mentioned. Community spouse is allowed to keep the house with equity, of a value of equity up to $802,000 right now. That also allowed to keep one car and then half of the assets up to $130,380. So that's what the community spouse is allowed to keep from the assets. How we get there is that if we look at the combined marital assets, putting aside the house, and the car, so we're looking at all the other assets, retirement accounts, bank accounts, investment accounts, all that is the pool from which. So
cumulatively, it cannot exceed $800,000, $802,000.
The house.
Just the value.
Oh, the
equity
that's just
in
the value of the house.
Okay.
So that's nice to know.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the other assets that you were just referring to.
So in his example, let's just pretend husband has a 401k of $500,000. Let's pretend the other liquid assets total $200,000. Right? So for a total of $700,000.
Right.
So how much does the community spouse get to keep? $130,000. How much do we have to spend of all of the assets? Everything but $130,000. Right? So that means, what's that, 600 plus something?
Right.
That 500 something. So all of that gets spent down for his care, leaving the community spouse, remember, with only that $130,000. That's not a lot. What if the roof has to be fixed on the house?
Right. So when we say spent down for his care, let's back up a second. Those funds have to be spent down. They don't have to be spent down on the care. Totally.
Well,
because there are some expenses that the community spouse can use those funds for to
right.
spend those down, but they would still be able to have some benefit. For example, like Marianne just said,
okay, but hold on.
If the house, let's just say that $500,000 was sitting there, right?
Yeah.
And they were in the spend down period, right, where they had to spend the funds down to $130,000.
Yep.
That spouse could use some of those funds to put a new roof on the house, to put a new bathroom in, to
because you're reinvesting back into the home.
right,
Okay.
but it's an allowable expense, right? So I'm just saying that whole $500,000 or whatever doesn't have to be paid to the nursing home. It can be used by that community spouse,
providing it's going back into the home.
Allowable expenses. So
Okay.
So my only point, Ned, was just to make sure the audience understood what the general rule was, and then we could kind of talk about how we could pull back and help them save some money to help support the spouse who is living in the community, right? So the general rule is everything has to be spent for, in this case, the husband's care. What Ned is talking about is, all right, we know your husband needs to be in a nursing home. We know that there's going to be a Title 19 application that we have to file. Is there anything, because that's what people come to us for, is there anything we can do to help the community spouse, not impoverish this wife in our example? And so Ned's saying, well, what condition is the house in? A lot of older people, they think everything is just fine, right? Or they're willing to live with, okay, look, in the Great Depression, we didn't have this, where everything is good, right? But what if the spouse really needed a new car because she was driving a 17-year-old car? What if the house does need a new roof? Now is the time to get that done, because everything that you put into the house now is going to enable this community spouse to live there longer for less money, or if she needs to move, she'll be able to sell it and utilize those whatever that house is worth for her own benefit. Again, we're trying not to impoverish her too,
Gotcha.
because we expect her, in this little hypothetical that we gave, to live a long time, or to live longer, certainly longer than her husband.
I find it incredible that with all of this happening, so many families throughout the state, that the government looks at every expense, every asset that you've had for 5 years back from the date that you applied for Title 19. So the process must take a bit of time.
It can.
It definitely does. One of the things that we do is we do assist families in helping to put together the Medicaid application.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have clients who have everything in order. All those documents, the statements are readily available. Sometimes you have a surviving spouse, right? So a single spouse now, and then the kids are trying to help get this application done, and they have to track down all the statements. They have to go to the banks and ask the banks for 5 years of statements because the parent didn't keep them. So it can drag out.
Yeah.
Based on how quickly you get the information to.
And then we find out where the money really went. So if dad has been supporting one of the children, right, we find out pretty quickly when we take a look at those bank statements. If, Ned had this fascinating Title 19 application recently where the wife was the one who needed the long-term skilled care. She needs to be in the nursing home. And she was taking out significant sums of cash. And she was hiding it in the bushes at the house. We didn't know it. She was burying it. He didn't know it. So we had to provide DSS with an explanation. Where did the $20,000 go? Where did this $10,000 go? Where did the stock certificates go? I mean,
oh my goodness.
So
yeah, those stock certificates were under the azaleas, I think, and
you're not kidding.
He's not kidding.
Yeah, and we had
Literally.
to take them, and they saw them. They were all, they had been weathered. They were, they were all,
wow.
They'd been rained on, dirt and everything.
Right.
So it was.
Right? It was like that little Easter egg hunt.
Right.
But at the same time, it's very sad to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think that the positive side is that because we have this program in place, that it is there to support people who really need it.
Folks, if you're hearing this and you've got questions or maybe have something to add to it, or maybe just want to inquire about the services for both Mary Ann Charron and Ned Barron, I recommend you doing a couple of things. Number one, I would start with their website. It's real easy, www.charteroaklaw.com. Again, it's charteroaklaw.com. They've got locations in Bloomfield, Danbury, and Norfolk, but I'm going to give you a phone number that you should write down. And keep it close by. Don't lose it. It's 860-570-1229. Once again, 860-570-1229. Incidentally, if you would like to email them a question, maybe it's of a personal nature, that's very easy to do. Just simply email them at legalnotes@charteroaklaw.com. However, if you don't mind sharing your question, maybe we can all benefit from it. Well, I encourage you to email as well. Again, same email address. It's legalnotes@charteroaklaw.com. For Mary Ann Charron and Ned Barron, I'm Gary Byron. Thank you so much for listening. Until next Saturday, have a good one, everybody. So long.